To order. Let me just take a look over our tech. A thumbs up. We're good. Calls me into order. We will start with the invocation given by Pastor Pam, followed immediately by a moment of silence for former Mayor Carl Brewer, and then a pledge of allegiance. So we ask that you please rise if you're willing and able.
Let us pray. This morning, Lord, we have gathered at the seat of the City Council for today's session. We pray for each person present and their families. We pray for the health of every person residing in ICT and globally. We pray that each council person's countenance exemplifies integrity. As the City Council discusses, unveils, and introduces action plans for ICT, may they embrace the cries of our youth for our city and be determined to make a difference that impacts the future. May we witness the establishment of viable policies and procedures, resources, and ongoing dialogue that considers all sides, speaks clearly, speaks up for justice, and implements change at all levels. Dialogue that addresses the urgent needs of ICT, health concerns, health care, homelessness, substandard housing, educational disparities, unemployment, environmental challenges, and fiscal impact on households and businesses, and human life value. Lord, guide us as we navigate through COVID-19, protests, marches, forums, meetings, as we receive the call to action and move forward, seizing moments to eradicate fear. Let there be productive interaction within the City Council, which displays leadership working together for the common goal of our city and every community therein. May wisdom prevail in decision-making and deliberation. Lord, we love our city. We are expecting change, and we cannot remain silent. Grasping the opportunity, may each person serve, be an agent of change, facing realities, answering the difficult questions, admitting not knowing, being present, creating a momentum for environmental change. As movement occurs collaboratively, may we face each moment with hope and a clear understanding that humankind matters. Bless this meeting today, all those present, as well as the lives of those we will encounter afterwards. Prepare us to make every moment count. In Jesus' name, amen.
Now for a moment of silence for Mayor Brewer. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Pastor. Madam Clerk?
Approval of the minutes of the regular meeting on June 9th, 2020.
Has every member had a chance to review the minutes? Is there any discussion on the minutes or proposed amendments to the minutes? See none. With that, I will make a motion to accept the minutes as printed.
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded. Clerk will open roll. Members cast the vote. For the result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Proclamations, National Day of Joy.
First proclamation is the National Day of Joy. Proclamation of the City of Wichita, Kansas, founded in 1870. Whereas the National Day of Joy, sponsored by Comfort Keepers, is about finding joy in everyday moments. It is important for maintaining your physical health, mental health, and overall well-being. Whereas the National Day of Joy was inaugurated in 2019 by Comfort Keepers, a provider of in-home care for seniors and other adults. As part of the first annual Day of Joy, Comfort Keepers released the results of its National State of Joy survey, which polled Americans on what brings the most joy in their lives. Whereas the survey found that people with the greatest level of joy are older, with those over 60 averaging higher levels of joy than 18 to 29-year-olds and those 45 to 60. Whereas the people we care for desire all the same things that people of any age do: connectedness, love, meaning, purpose, and hope. Comfort Keepers believes that helping seniors find joy will benefit our clients, their families, and our nation. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Brandon Whipple, Mayor of the City of Wichita, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim June 24th, 2020 as Comfort Keepers Wichita Day of Joy in the City of Wichita, and encourage all citizens to celebrate the simple things that bring us joy. Next would be a proclamation recognizing Juneteenth. Proclamation of the City of Wichita, Kansas, founded in 1870. Whereas Juneteenth is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the end of slavery in the United States. And whereas on June 19th, 1865, Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger landed in Galveston, Texas, with news that the war had ended and that the enslaved were now free. This was 2.5 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which had become official January 1st, 1863. And whereas Wichita thrives on its vibrant cultural heritage, and African Americans represents a vital part of our diverse ethnic and social community, and acknowledges the role African Americans from Wichita have played in leading impactful civil rights efforts in Kansas and in the nation. And whereas June 19th, 2020 is a day to celebrate the news that African Americans were free from slavery and stand in solidarity with African Americans throughout this country, still fighting for equality all these years later. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Brandon Whipple, Mayor of the City of Wichita, Kansas, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim June 19th, 2020 as Juneteenth in the City of Wichita, and urge all citizens to wholeheartedly recognize this celebration and learn more about the struggles African Americans still face in 2020. Madam Clerk.
Andrew Crane, Wichita Transit.
All right, we're going to shift it over to the staff over at Century 2. The floor is yours. Hey, Andrew.
Good
welcome.
morning,
Good morning.
Council and Mr. Mayor and City Manager. I'm here today to talk to you about the access and transportation and how much we need transportation in this town, getting the bus drivers and getting them more access, and getting Braille up on the buses, and getting access to the blind and disabled community. I am a big advocate for the blind and disabled community, and it's about time you guys follow ADA guidelines, and any signage that you guys put up needs to be in Braille for the blind and visually impaired. Any questions?
There are no questions from the bench. You still have time, or have you concluded, or would you like to use the remainder of your time?
I just have one question for the council, and I want you to walk in my shoes and walk around in the city and be able to find your way, shutting your eyes, and navigating in my shoes for a day. And I challenge you guys again and again to walk with me in the city under blindfold with a cane, and you navigate this city. It's time you guys take a good challenge and look at access and how much we need transportation, because it's time that you guys show your true colors.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Mr. Manager, could we get a breakdown of what the cost would be to upgrade some of our signage to include Braille over the next couple weeks?
Yeah, yes, we're actually working on that. I think Mr. Crane's biggest concern has been with some of the new signage we've had for social distancing in the buses, and the Braille was not installed in the buses to show that. So I know that we're working on that issue, but I can bring that back if you want.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you. Looks like we have another citizen, Alan Trainery, who would like to speak as well, so the floor is deferred to Century 2.
Mayor, Mr. Trineri is not here this morning.
Okay. Madam Clerk.
Consent agenda items 1 through 11.
Has every member had a chance to review the consent agenda items? The Chair recognizes Vice Mayor Claycomb.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to pull item 2-5 from consent, please.
Item 2-5 will be pulled from consent. Would you please tell us the title of the item for those who are watching?
Approval of agreement at 400 West Douglas.
Item will be pulled from consent and placed right below the consent agenda items on the printed agenda. Is there any more discussion on agenda items? If none, then I would move the approval of items 1 through 11 with the exception of item, is it 2.5? 2.5 that has been taken off the consent agenda items. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion about said motion? If not, clerk will open a roll. Members will cast their vote. With a result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. We are on now consent agenda item 2.5. The chair will recognize the Vice Mayor Claycomb.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe that the police department's here to talk a little bit about this item. We've had a lot of support from the community on this, and I think it was, and some discussion, and I think it's would be good to have a presentation on this, or at least you know, some comments on this. So,
Of course.
thank you.
Vice Mayor, what we were planning on doing is maybe just give you a little bit of background why we're to this point, and the safety precautions that will be implemented through the camera
Yeah,
system.
and I think it's good to recognize where, like you said, where we are in this, because
Yep.
this is not approval of the cameras today. But
Right.
thank you.
Good morning. I'm Captain Travis Rakestraw.
Welcome, sir.
This is a project that's been in the works for a while with a partnership that we have with the Wichita Police Foundation, and Becca Newman is here today to talk on their behalf. Basically, the idea behind this is we had been approached by citizens throughout the community talking about their perception of safety along the bike paths along the river in the downtown area. We know that many people use this area for, you know, nice walks of an evening, or for jogging, exercise, bicycling, things like that. And there's an emphasis on us not only to bring people to the downtown area with the ballpark and the added business that we expect to see in the future in that area, but also for us to make sure that they feel safe and it's a welcoming environment for them to come to this area and enjoy themselves. Crime happens all over the city. This is no exception. There have been several cases throughout the years that has drawn attention to the downtown area. This year, in February, we had a homicide of a homeless man underneath the Douglas Street Bridge. And that adds to the perception of fear in this area. That crime is currently unsolved. Had we had cameras in this area, there's a good likelihood that we would have developed leads or a suspect that would help us further that investigation. But as it sits today, it's not solved. Just last week, or I think it was earlier this month, Exploration Place experienced a vandalism on the river side of the building where they had $30,000 worth of windows shot out. Again, that would have happened from the area along the river, along the bike path, where cameras would have been beneficial. So between the perception of crime and the actual crime that does occur in that area, we felt that it was a very good partnership and idea to put cameras in this area that would benefit all of us. The camera system that we were talking about putting in is 6 cameras that would go from the Keeper of the Plains down to the Harry Street Bridge. We understand the Harry Street Bridge is still under construction, so that would take place at a further date. But these are areas that we felt that we could capture the area that we're talking about and make people feel safe throughout that area.
Questions for the conferee? I have one. I had a concerned citizen email me worried that the cameras might be an attempt to displace the homeless population or population who happen to be homeless who live around the river. Would you be able to speak to that?
Well, homelessness, of course, happens all over the place, and we know that they've encamped in that area along the river. That's not our intention at all. In fact, we find opportunities to engage them, give them access to resources, things like that. We have the homeless outreach team that we use to go out and make contact with a lot of these people. We have volunteers from the Citizens Police Academy Alumni Association who work that area of a weekend during the day, and their whole intention is to add to that sense of security for our citizens. So they're out there engaging the public. They're reporting suspicious activity, and one of the things, as I understand it, is when they encounter homeless people along the river, they provide them information about resources that are available. It's not our intention to use this in any way to disparage them or to move them out of the area, but it's more so to identify crime that occurs and help us further those investigations after the fact, and to add to the overall sense of security for people when they know that there's cameras in the area that are keeping an eye on what's going on for their safety.
And you mentioned that there was an incidence of violence against a homeless person that resulted in a homicide. It's reasonable to believe that these cameras would actually provide protection for people who are homeless who use that area.
Well, I believe so. I think that the more the word gets out that there's cameras in that area, it helps to deter crime, but also it helps to further the investigations on the back end. So when we see people when we identify suspects and we solve crime, we're stopping crime from occurring further. So if we run into a crime trend in that area where it's occurring over and over again, if we can put a stop to that by making an arrest, then that helps to stop the crime from occurring.
Thank you. Further questions? Megan, my understanding is there might be people at Century 2 who would like to speak to this. Are there people at Century 2 who would like to speak to this? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, yes, we have one gentleman who's coming up. Two gentlemen. Oh, two. Who are coming up.
Perfect.
All right, go ahead.
Welcome, sir.
Council Mayor, I'm Joseph Tex Dozier, 215 North Parkwood. I live in Councilman Johnson's district. I'm here as a proud Wichitan. I'm here as someone who uses and takes advantage of the river often. I ran my first ultra marathon along the river during the Urban ICT race. I'm here as an affirmer that Black Lives Matter, as someone who has stood in solidarity alongside protesters at assemblies and gatherings, as a longtime political advocate for criminal justice reform and our constitutional rights. And I'm also here as a board member of the Wichita Police Foundation. The safety arguments around this project are self-evident. From the tangible positive benefits we've seen with similar cameras in Old Town to our city's vision for its future, for its ballpark, and its growth. But further, during this time, as our country grapples with its original sin and tries to push forward and live up to our founding principles and values, it's more important than ever before for our community to commit to transparency, accountability, and to policies and projects that further such. This particular project should not serve as some strongman, as a trophy for the opposing few against it, owing to how critical it is not just to our safety, but to our commitment to accountability, to transparency, and to open, fair policing. We all watched in horror the video of Amy Cooper calling the police in Central Park against Chris Cooper, frantically saying at distance that she was under duress, under attack, and that an African-American man was threatening her. What if officers had arrived on that scene and Mr. Cooper hadn't filmed that exchange? Or officers didn't have the benefit of cameras in the park there to know what really happened? The riverfront should be for all Wichitans, whether jogging, visiting the keeper, or watching a ball game. Whether living, playing, or working, all Wichitans should feel safe in their rights and in their persons. These cameras will protect the professionalism of our police, will protect the property and lives of our citizens, and will protect our rights, as the footage could be the difference in the due process exoneration of an innocent life or in the police not incorrectly profiling someone. While I understand many have been opposed to this for various reasons, I think it's notable that many who are opposed to it have publicly posted not just their desire to reform, reallocate, or defund the Wichita Police Department, but to fully abolish it and remove every officer from the city. I would at least like to have these cameras if this dream does come true, because at the very least it doesn't cut into the budget at all that they want to gut. If you believe in the importance of police body cameras, you support this project. If we believe in Wichita's progress and future, we support this project. And if we believe that Black Lives Matter and in transparency and accountability during police interactions in our city, we support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Megan, the floor is yours for the next speaker.
We have one more coming up right now.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Zach Gingrich Gaylord, and I'm somewhere around here. All right, there we go.
You're very tall.
Thank you. I wrote a letter to the city about this, and I'll just be fairly brief and significantly less eloquent than the previous speaker. The concerns that I have and many others that I've spoken with have with this project have to do with a couple issues. The first is that the motivating factor provided by the Wichita Police Foundation and the police of crime and an uptick of crime around the river uses dubious claims to justify this surveillance. We haven't found any sources to corroborate the number of crimes that the Wichita Police Foundation has on their website. They claim 266 reports of crime along the river within 200 square feet of the river over the past 14 months. We used LexisNexis Community Crime Map tool, which tracks Wichita Police reports, and couldn't find nearly that many. The second point we have is that the Eyes on the River project isn't citizen-driven insofar as it doesn't go through the channels of democratic processes. The Wichita Police Foundation is a private nonprofit foundation. The nearly $140,000 has come from only 14 donors that they listed on their website. That's an average of $10,000 each. These are not small amounts coming from large amounts of people. The largest contributors are Fidelity Bank Foundation and Waterwalk, which have given $25,000 each to the project. Many of the donors have significant material interest in downtown and the development of downtown. We feel this is undemocratic, uses the police as a private security force, influencing its priorities away from protecting the public good and towards their own particular interests. During this time of vibrant and intense public questioning of the role of police in our community, I also think it's particularly tone deaf for the city to pass increases in public funding or resources without significant public comment and deliberation. Things have changed since the pandemic, and things have changed in the past couple of weeks as the uprisings across America have taken place. Projects such as this that may have started with good intentions a year ago need to be brought into the light of the new contexts that we're dealing with socially right now. There is also substantial research on the inherent racist bias of surveillance technologies. A city that's truly committed to anti-racism should be more deliberate and thoughtful around these issues. The perception of crime, to wrap up, doesn't square with the reality of crime along the river. The funding for the camera project at $140,000 so far is nearly half the total city budget for homeless outreach. We feel that you protect homeless people not by surveilling them, but by giving them resources. At $600 a month for an apartment, you could buy 20 apartments for a year with that amount of money. At the very least, we feel that any further movement of this project forward should be tabled and deliberated publicly and put through democratic processes and not driven by the momentum of private nonprofits and businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments from the public at this time, Megan?
I do not believe so.
Excellent. Other discussion from the bench? Mr. Manager, one of the comments, and I just want a clarification, that the $148,000 that was raised privately outweighs the amount of resources the city uses for homeless. Can you confirm or give details on that statement? We could get Sally up here, but it looks like a long walk, so Chair recognizes Sally. And for those who aren't watching, the manager pointed at Sally.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Mayor, members of council. No, we spend significantly more assisting the homeless. It does cost on average about $438 a month for rent assistance. That does not include any type of wraparound service. We spend more than $238,000 annually in ESG funding. We spend almost $1 million in Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing funding, in addition to the $191,000 committed by both the city and the county for Housing First. So we spend significantly more.
And just a follow-up, because I think that this is we have a lot of people who, with the budget similar out right now, a lot of people are looking at our budgets, and I think there's some confusion about the general fund and other monies that your department gets. Could you speak to that on a lot of, when you look at the budget, it looks like your department gets a small amount, but can you talk briefly about your funding mix?
Sure. The majority, we're about 98% federally funded. So we do receive $191,000 in general fund from both the city and the county for the Housing First program, which is provided as required match for the ESG program. We receive $238,000 in ESG regular funding that requires a dollar for dollar match. But everything else is federal funding through the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Excellent. Any questions for the director? Seeing none, Chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to highlight on this agenda item first, I appreciate the allyship of the two speakers and what the officer said earlier, but I also want to add to that between the riverfront development going on the East Bank, or potential riverfront development, and the development on the West Bank, these cameras were brought to our attention to make sure the area was safe, and to Joseph's point, making sure that there were eyes on the area, because if something were to happen, we want to make sure that we have that on video so we can solve a crime if it happens. And that was where this came from. Private dollars being raised to help out. I have publicly always talked about our budget not being enough for certain things, so this was an effort in the private sector to support our law enforcement department to put those cameras out there. And as we plan to see 200 events from baseball, other developments going on, this is an opportunity to keep everyone safe in the area, our homeless folks, folks from out of town, and citizens here in Wichita who are just down there enjoying the evening. There was some concern brought up about the one incident in Old Town where WPD had written a few tickets, but Chief Ramsey stopped that at the time. Chief Ramsey has also said that's not the point of these cameras, and again, it's to keep everyone safe. So I just wanted to highlight that. I'm supportive of this because of those reasons, And again, Joseph made a lot of good points. If something were to happen and there were allegations, at least there's an eye in the sky that can help prove the truth. And I'm not someone who likes Big Brother all the time, but you know, in this case, that is true to me. So I am supportive. I just wanted to say additional reasons as to why this is good, and I appreciate the private sector for helping fund this project.
Anybody else wish to speak to the item? With that, I will mention that I very much respect the dialogue on, I believe, our emails and today with the public coming out and presenting eloquent arguments for both sides. I am going to be in support of this project because when I was first elected and we had a African-American homeless man who was violently murdered, a friend of the family reached out to me and gave me details about that and discussed really just how heinous that crime was, and knowing that if we would have had this system there, we could have taken or had a better chance of finding the person who created this act of violence against a member of our vulnerable population, of the Wichitans who happen to be homeless. So with that, I think this is a step in the right direction in deterring other violence against our homeless population, and it is budget neutral as far as our general fund goes, because it was funded by private dollars through a nonprofit, which provides also a level of transparency. So if there's no further discussion, which there apparently isn't, I would make a motion to accept the item.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, the clerk will open the roll. Members will cast their vote. With a result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Award of bids and contracts dated June 15th, 2020.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hannah Lang, Department of Finance, here to present the June 15th Board of Bids recommendations. First engineering bid we have is water distribution system and sanitary sewer to serve the Ranch Addition Phase 2. Recommendation is Wildcat Construction for Group 1 and Group 2 for an aggregate total of $143,982. Sanitary sewer to serve Northgate 3rd Edition, Nowak Construction Company for $105,195. Sanitary sewer to serve Bradley Fair 3rd Edition, a rebid. Recommendation is Domliner and Sons Construction Company for $86,361.30. Plant 3 gravity influent pipe and manhole repairs. Recommendation is Wildcat Construction for the base bid of $302,002. Mid-Mountain aerial platforms. Recommendation is Conrad Fire Equipment for $2,910,227.90. Roof and gutter repairs on drive-through at the Advanced Learning Library. Recommendation is Donlier and Sons Construction for $55,160. SQL Server license for WPD RMS project. Recommendation is SHI International Corp. for $66,084. Microsoft EA True-Up SHI International for $223,656. Microsoft EA Year 2 of 3 SHI International for $778,334.63. This is the purchasing procurement website, as well as our current request for proposals. That is our Board of Bids recommendations. With that, I stand for any questions.
Other questions for the conferee? Are there comments from the public? See none. Discussion will come back to the bench. Questions for staff? See none. With that, I will make a motion to accept recommended action of receiving and file the report, approve the contracts, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. If there's no discussion on the said motion, clerk will open the roll. Members will cast their vote. With a result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. I will ask the council for their indulgence for a moment. Mr. Alan Trinery did make it to Century 2 about 5 minutes after we moved on to the next item. So because he went through the process of speaking publicly and being there, and because he had to go to Century 2 and not just here, there's a reason to believe there might have been some confusion. If there is no objection, I'd like to go back to the public agenda to hear Alan Trinery, and then we will return to the current status of the agenda. See no objection. With that, Megan, you have the floor to facilitate Mr. Allen. Welcome, sir.
You're on. Okay. I really appreciate giving me mercy and allowing me to speak, since I didn't make it on time, but I wasn't aware that I'd have to speak from here. I was at City Hall on time. I really feel that the new administration is much more humane and kind and understanding of the public. I've been involved in public speaking and approaching government entities most of my life. You know, I was in student council when I was in school. I've also caused my share of trouble in the past in Colorado. I would really like to see a greater deal of mercy put forward on political issues. When I first came here, we had an effort to make the penalties for possession of small amounts of cannabis less, and it was shut down by the politicians in Topeka. It was very disappointing, very upsetting. This gets back to my personal agenda, things that why I'm here in Kansas instead of still in Colorado. But I do want to emphasize that I really appreciate the new administration. I feel that you're more open to hearing what the citizens want to speak to, and issues, the way that you just handled this issue that you're talking about now, that you acknowledge that there are different points of view. I'm the member at large of my neighborhood association, which I take this very seriously, to be involved in my community, to reach out and talk to people. And I'm hoping that we can move forward in our society and show mercy to parts of the community that are being held down. And with the amount of damage that has been done to our economy by shutting down so much of it due to this pandemic, which I feel is greatly exacerbated by the amount of environmental degradation which has taken place over the years for various other things that have, for economic development. My main axe that I grind, my personal thing that I pull for, is medical cannabis and industrial hemp. I very strongly believe that the money that is used to enforce marijuana laws, put people in jail for it, is far more damaging than anything that people do by participating in utilizing the substance. And promoting industrial hemp in the state of Kansas is a no-brainer. There's so much to be gained. We have this huge, huge, huge explosion of CBD products, which is getting the medical benefit out of industrial hemp and not having the other compounds that are present in marijuana, which lead to the urinalysis getting people in trouble and so on and so forth. Is, apples for oranges and nitpicking and protecting civil asset forfeiture laws. And I just am really hopeful, very, very hopeful, that we can move forward and allow mercy. Like I said, I'm very thankful for our new administration. Thank you for offering me the opportunity to speak after I missed my time slot. And thank you for your service. I appreciate you. Appreciate all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for being here with us today and also for your service in a neighbor association. It's appreciated. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Public hearing and issuance of multifamily housing revenue bonds, Steel Somerset LLC.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Tim Goodpasture with the City's Office of Economic Development. For the record, the item before you today is a request for the issuance of multifamily housing revenue bonds for Somerset Plaza. Steel Somerset is a recently formed legal entity for owning real estate that is owned by Steel Properties out of Denver, Colorado. This is the second project that Steel Properties is investing in Wichita. Earlier this year, they closed on the Shadyway Plaza Tower Apartments in North Wichita. Currently, they are acquiring the Somerset Tower Apartments, which is located at 2395 Somerset Street, and intends to rehabilitate that facility. On May 12th of this year, the City Council approved a letter of intent to issue multifamily housing revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $12 million. The developer is now requesting the issuance of those bonds. In this area, you can see kind of in the center here, outlined in yellow, this is the location of the Somerset Plaza Tower, which is north of 21st Street and east of the Little Arkansas River. Somerset Plaza Tower Apartments is a 100-unit apartment complex for low-income seniors and disabled residents. It was built in 1979 and has had very little maintenance or upgrades since that time. The facility is covered by a Section 8 Housing Assistance Payment Program, which the developer intends to renew for an additional 20 years when they close on the facility later this month. In addition to the acquisition costs, the developer intends to invest approximately $3.6 million in renovation for this facility, which includes Americans for Disabilities Act requirements, bathroom and kitchen renovations, painting and landscaping the exterior, installing hardwired smoke and CO2 detectors, new refrigerators and ranges in all of the units, among other improvements. These are some photos of the exterior of the facility. These are photos of a particular unit within the facility, and these are some photos of the common areas within the facility. Steel Somerset has applied for 4% low-income housing tax credits through the state of Kansas, which requires the use of bonds to achieve tax-exempt financing. The bonds are used for tax-exempt financing as well as a sales tax exemption. There is no property tax abatement being requested. The bonds will be privately placed with KeyBank National Association. Therefore, it is staff's recommendation that the City Council close the public hearing and place on first reading the bond ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of documents for the issuance of multifamily housing revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $12 million for Steel Somerset LLC, and authorize the necessary signatures. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Is there questions from the bench? Discussion? See none. Questions from the gallery? From Century 2. See none. With that, the chair recognizes Vice Mayor Claycomb as this project falls into District 6.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate this project from Steel Somerset. So I move that the council close the public hearing, place on first reading the bond ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of documents for the issuance of multifamily housing revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $12 million for Steel Somerset LLC, and authorize the necessary signatures.
I will second. If there's no discussion on the motion, clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. The result is 7 yeas to 0 nays. The motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Public hearing and issuance of healthcare facilities revenue bonds, American Baptist Estates.
Again, Mayor and City Council members, Tim Goodpasture with the City's Office of Economic Development. For the record, the next item before you is a request for refunding revenue bonds for American Baptist Estates. American Baptist Estates, which is doing business in Wichita as Prairie Homestead, was founded in 1963 as a provider of independent and assisted living care. It is a 501c3 private not-for-profit that is located at 1605 West May, which is north of Pawnee and west of Elizabeth or west of Seneca. The area outlined in red is the campus for American Baptist Estates, again north of Pawnee and west of Seneca. In 2016, the City Council approved the issuance of healthcare facilities revenue bonds in the amount of $4 million. These funds were used to demolish 6 existing structures that had 9 units each. The company went in and rebuilt with only 4 units on the same footprint. So essentially they built larger units with more modern amenities. On May 12th of this year, the City Council approved a letter of intent to issue healthcare facilities revenue refunding bonds in an amount not to exceed $3,320,000. This is basically a refinancing of the outstanding debt that the company issued in 2016, and this is strictly to achieve an interest rate savings at this time. Therefore, it is staff's recommendation that the City Council close the public hearing and place on first reading the bond ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of documents for the issuance of healthcare facilities revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $3,320,000 and authorize the necessary signatures. Be happy to answer any questions.
Is there questions on the item? See none, the chair will recognize Councilmember Bubag as this item falls into District 4.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I'd like to take the recommended action to close the public hearing, place on the first reading the bond ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of documents for the issuance of healthcare facilities revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $3,320,000 and authorize the necessary signatures.
Now second. There's no discussion on said motion. Clerk will open the roll. Members will cast the vote. For the result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
2020 Arterial Sidewalk Program.
Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. The item before you this morning is the 2020 Arterial Sidewalk Program. The capital improvement program every year includes funding for installation of sidewalk and wheelchair ramps on arterial streets. For some time now, the City Council has had a policy that staff follows when reconstructing arterial streets to build sidewalk on both sides. However, we've got many miles of existing arterial streets, a lot of them that had been in the county at one time that have no sidewalk, sometimes sidewalk on one side of the street. Over time, this program has been really successful in following demand and requests from the public in particular where sidewalk is needed. We've talked for a long time about how you can go out and find a cow path where people have created a path and see where that demand might be. There's a lot of ways that we get requests for this new sidewalk where it does not exist. That includes through social media town hall meetings. We have a monthly meeting with USD 259 staff where we talk about needs of the schools as related to existing neighborhoods. The Wichita Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board has been a really good resource for us on this too. And in speaking with a lot of you over time, items specific to your districts that council members hear from those within their districts has been really valuable for adding information to this program. We've got 3 specific locations as of right now for this year's program that I'll talk about real quick. There may be more locations added as funding allows. The first location, you can see the red line is on the south side of 37th Street North, just east of Ridge Road. To the bottom center of this picture, if anybody's familiar with this area, and south of there, St. Catherine's Church has extended considerably, and school. There's a lot of development that's come about because of that in the area. We've had multiple requests for school children in particular to have a sidewalk connection back to 37th and Ridge. And then if you go to the left off of this screen to the west, it also connects down to the May South School campus. So we are working on acquiring some easement in the area right now, and we think this will be a good connection back to that neighborhood. The second one here, the upper right of this screen is Wichita West High School. This is along where McCormick and Lincoln come together. Towards the bottom right of this screen is a fairly new Grace Med clinic. And not shown on this aerial, there's actually sidewalk that connects going east all the way to McLean now. So this red dashed line you see is the only gap in this entire area to connect between Seneca and McLean. This is not much sidewalk to put in, but this, looking at this right here, is a very good reason why this program exists and works really well to provide the additional pedestrian connection. The last one to look at here in this picture is actually tipped on its side to make it fit. North is to the right. This is North Arkansas, and what you see in the middle top is Earhart Environmental School. We've had multiple requests over the years for this location, and even though it doesn't connect to any other sidewalk in the area, if you went up to the upper right above this screen, it's heavy residential, a lot of foot traffic for children accessing that school. We've had multiple requests over the years, even from the neighborhood to the east, to provide sidewalk in this area for safer access. Towards the upper left is City of Wichita Park also that we can provide access to with this recommended sidewalk. So with that, the CMP includes $450,000 in 2020, which we're requesting the council to approve all at this time. With that, staff asks that the council approve the project and locations, adopt the resolution, authorize the necessary signatures. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions? Comments? Discussion? Chair recognizes Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to give a shout out to the neighbors and the residents of the area of the 37th Street sidewalk. That was one that escaped me, that connection. And we had several dozen family members as well as students from the surrounding neighborhood, as well as Father Dan Spexarth from St. Catherine brought this to my attention. And along with the connection to Mace South campus, it is a very important missing link. So I'm grateful that the residents spoke out and brought it to my attention so we can include this.
Any further discussion? See none. Given the support demonstrated by Councilmember Fry, I will relieve the floor for a motion to Councilmember Fry.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. So I make a motion that we recommend the City Council approve the project. I'm sorry. The City Council approve the project and locations, adopt the resolution, and authorize the necessary signature.
I will second. There's no discussion on the motion. Then clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. The result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Lease of space at 4195 East Terry for relocation of the Linwood Branch Library.
Good morning, Mayor, members of council. Cynthia Berner, Director of Libraries, for the record.
Morning.
The item before you today is a proposed lease agreement with Coco Properties LLC to enable the relocation of the Linwood Branch Library. Located within Linwood Recreation Center in 1901, Kansas, the Linwood Branch opened in 1981 as a relocation of the Boulevard Branch, which was originally located in the Boulevard Plaza at Lincoln and George Washington Boulevard. Since that time, we've done relatively little to modernize the branch. We did add public computing when that service became available. The building's been recarpeted. We've replaced some lounge seating. Other than that, the branch exists today as it did back in 1981. It's approximately 3,700 square feet. We were able to put in 7 public computers. There's a very small conference room that seats 14 people. And because the branch is located within the Linwood Recreation Center, the hours must work within the hours of the Recreation Center, which means that for nearly 2 decades, there have been no weekend hours at this location. During the implementation of the master plan for branch libraries, the relocation of this branch was identified as a priority with a recommendation to move it into District 3 somewhere along Harry. We're really excited that we found a facility that enables us to do that. This proposed site is at 4195 East Harry. It's an outbuilding on the parcel that people may know as the Wichita Mall, the Harry Street Mall, or the WSU South Campus. It is a storefront facility where we would have great visibility from Harry, which is a wonderful benefit for customers who have a great deal of difficulty finding their current location. There are also benefits to this location as well relating to that access. This property has direct access to 2 transit lines. The 22 and 202 routes go directly in front of the building. The space is larger. It's approximately 6,900 square feet, which means we will be able to double our public computing capacity. We'll be able to put in a much larger meeting room, and we can locate that within the facility so that we can offer after-hours access to that space. We will be able to zone the space so that we can accommodate different types of users, different purposes. Right now, the size of the current Linwood branch makes it very difficult to do that. And then because it is a storefront, although we don't anticipate expanding the hours at this time because of the financial considerations, we'll have the opportunity to do that in the future. And then finally, as previously mentioned, this does restore library access into District 3. This is the working plan for the branch. You can see that we've been able to take advantage of a lot of the lessons that we learned when we created the Advanced Learning Library. On the right of the screen, you see the meeting room space, the relocated restrooms, which enable us to restrict that part of the building for the after-hours use, or then we can also do that and have access when the library is open. Immediately adjacent to that, we have an area separated out for children, parents, teens to go through. You can see a variety of seating in the plan. We do have the ability to increase public computing to 16 workstations plus the Wi-Fi capacities that go through, and we will be bringing in some self-service technologies. The operational costs related to the relocation will increase the general fund budget for the library by approximately $100,000 per year, with half of this directly related to the lease itself. In our current location, we don't pay custodial or pest control costs. Those are actually covered for us out of the park department budget, so that will be a new addition to the library budget. Similarly, we will have the cost for the utilities and the insurance for this space. We could incorporate the technology by relocating workstations from other locations, but if we just add to our inventory for the library, you'll see what the cost of that is. Those would be charges to our IT department if we expand that. We also know that because of the increased use of the facility, we will see increased revenue. We've tried to be very conservative in these estimates because we're also working very hard to make sure people don't have to incur fees at the library. We've done a lot of work to notify people before items become due, for example, to create opportunities so they don't have to place items on hold or do things. So that's one of our goals, is to do as much as we can to make sure all of the library services can be accessed without fees. The adopted CIP includes a $1 million project in general obligation funding for the project. Under the terms of the proposed lease, the result would significantly lower the need for the CIP funding, which would in turn lower future debt service fund annual payments. Purchase and installation of the furniture and equipment, as well as the relocation costs of the move, would continue to be funded through the CIP project. If you approve the lease today, we will continue to work with the owner and his architects, and will return to you with a request to initiate that project at the reduced bonding level once those expenses have been better identified. So John Philbrick in the Property Management Office did negotiate the lease for us. He's here to answer questions about that. I'll be able to answer questions about the project. With that, we do recommend that the City Council approve the lease agreement and authorize the necessary signatures, and we'll be happy to stand for questions at this time.
Questions or comments? The chair recognizes a whole bunch of people just jumped on. Councilmember Clendenin.
Hi, Cynthia. Thanks. I have more comments later about the process. But first I wanted to ask, there's a lot of concern with people that are using the Linwood branch right now, that we're going to shutter it up and that nothing will be available for them anymore over at the Linwood branch. As we've discussed, and I want to know how this has morphed or changed, if at all. There will still be reading materials available, and there will be some sort of space for seniors to still continue to lounge and get together. And can you explain what the plan is for the space?
The repurposing of the use of the space will actually be under the auspices of the park department. And I know they have several ideas for the use of that space. In regard to access to reading material, the requests that we are aware of have all come from the senior center, and we'll be happy to work with them and to provide them with bulk loans of material. We do that for several agencies. We actually use donated material that's come through the Friends of the Library Bookstore program, so they don't have to worry about keeping track of that, but we can refresh that as often as they need it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Cynthia, just piggybacking off of what Councilmember Clendenin said, a lot of the questions I get from the seniors at Linwood are, what is this presence? So I've repeated what you just said, but they want to see what that looks like and potentially be engaged. And I would like to request that at some point when these COVID restrictions are removed, that we sit down with them together and allow them to also help shape what that looks like, because I don't and they don't fully understand what the book loan deal looks like, and their concern was having access to the library and reading materials for the community. So I did tell them I would definitely talk about this. On this item, I am supportive because I think access is key, and having a new library over at Clapp, I think would be great for that community, and the way that park is redeveloping and opening up for folks who don't just play golf, I think is great over there, and this is a great opportunity. But I just want to make sure that the folks in Linwood have some type of understanding of what that is and if they can help shape it.
We'll be happy to do that.
Councilmember Frye.
Thank you, Mayor. Kind of echoing the last two council members here. I know that when I served on the Regional Branch Library Task Force, along with Vice Mayor Claycomb and Councilmember Bluebaugh, we spent a lot of time talking about Linwood Branch and how we knew that it wasn't performing at its best capabilities due to its location and access and limited hours. We talked a lot about Harry and Oliver area being a dream location, not only because of those items I just mentioned, but also because it brings library service back to District 3, which hasn't had service in a long time. So for all those reasons, I just wanted to thank the team that put this together, including the landlord or the owner of the property. I'm sure he could have done something else with that property, made more money with it, but the service to the community should be recognized, and I want to thank him for that.
Other comments on the item? See none, the chair will recognize Councilmember Clendenin for a motion, as this falls into District 3.
Have we gone out to the public yet? I just want to make sure.
There are questions from the public. Thank you.
Sorry. No.
Let me check real quick, Mayor. Does anyone want to speak on this issue? All right, seeing.
I don't quite understand it.
Okay. Mayor, not at this time.
Excellent, thank you. Is there any further discussion? If not, the chair will recognize Councilmember Clendenin for a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple comments too, and just trying to keep us out of hot water, so I appreciate that. You know, it's been, I think, ever since I've been on this council, I've not whined and stamped my feet, but I've gotten very close about library service in Southeast Wichita. And it's been a little contentious at times, I know, but I just want to bring up one young lady who came and spoke with us when we were talking about closing some of our branches. Actually, we weren't talking, it was just kind of we were trying to figure out how we're going to fill holes in our budget. And Emily came up and she spoke, and she's someone who used the Linwood branch, and very low income young lady, single father, and really, she says the Linwood branch saved her life. You know, it allowed her to be able to get an education and be able to do some things and get accepted to KU and do some things she not otherwise would have been able to do without having access to a computer and being able to do things online, which is required. I talked to her briefly to get her ideas about moving the branch since Linwood meant so much to her. And for her, she said that this is probably the most amazing opportunity, she thinks, for those that live in the Hilltop area, but not only that, those who go to Colvin Elementary and Jardine Middle School, which are in Plainview, not far from this location as well, especially with it being on the bus line. I met with the principals of Colvin Elementary and Jardine Middle School. Cynthia, I think you may have been in that meeting as well, along with some other stakeholders, and the programming and the stuff that they're ready to partner with the city on to help students in those schools from Plainview. They are so excited. I think they were going to jump out of their skin. They couldn't believe that these services were going to be so close. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that we have a definite information gap in parts of our city. It is true that most people have cell phones, but a lot of people have cell phones that they picked up for $10 or $15 that may be 5 or 6 years old, and they don't have service on it, and they all congregate over on Harry Street at the Burger King so they can use it, which includes students, so they can have some sort of Wi-Fi access. This is going to change that for the community. This, I really believe, is going to be a game changer for the community. I want to thank the library board. I'll out him. I want to thank Max Cole, who's the landlord, for stepping up and helping us do something that will not be net neutral, but something that's an extremely inexpensive way for us to go to help provide services to the community. So I'm done pontificating and being on my soapbox, but I cannot express how excited I am for the community. So that being said, I move that the city council approve the lease agreement and authorize all necessary signatures.
I'll second the motion. Motion's been made and seconded. If there's no discussion on said motion, clerk will open the roll. Members will cast the votes. With a result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass unanimously. Madam Clerk.
Acquisition of 2120 North Hoover Road for the Northwest Wichita Water Facility.
Mayor and council members, John Philbrick, Real Estate Administrator. The item before you is the approval of the contract to acquire the property at 2120 North Hoover Road for the Northwest Water Facility. Let's see how we are doing this today. There we go. Back on March 17th, the City Council, we're just going to fight with it. March 17th, the City Council approved making an offer of $5.4 million for this property. At the time, it was discussed that this property is required for the efficient development of the new water facility. Property has about 5.3 acres and has is developed with a 425-unit self-storage facility. It is immediately west of the water facility and contiguous to it. Also provides access to Hoover Road, which the current facility does not have. Here's an aerial of the property and its proximity. The offer of $5.4 million was made to the owner. He rejected this offer. After negotiation, he's agreed to accept $6.2 million for the site. The settlement amount is based on utilizing some of the actual operating results from the facility and capitalizing those at a market rate. The owner, as part of the agreement, will operate the property during the relocation of all the tenants and has agreed to assist the city with the relocation as far as outreach to the tenants, helping them find new locations, and so on. During the vacation of the property, he will be assuming all costs of the operation. All the displaced occupants are eligible for relocation compensation. We have a consultant on board that is ready to send out notices as soon as this contract is approved to start that process. The acquisition of this site will allow operational efficiencies and also will save money in the development of the water facility. It is recommended the City Council approve the contract and authorize all necessary signatures, and with that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions? Questions from the bench? Megan, over at Century 2, do we have any discussion from the public?
Mayor, we do not.
Chair recognizes Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mayor. John, I just want to be clear, as opposed to the last offer that was rejected, this time around, we have a signature from the owner, and he has agreed to this price, and there's no back and forth anymore, correct?
He's agreed to the price. He has agreed to assist us in the relocation, which is, with this many individuals, is going to be very important to get the property vacant in a timely manner.
But this is last and final, correct?
We're done.
Thank you.
Other questions on the item or discussion? See none. Thank you. With that, the chair will recognize Vice Mayor Claycomb as this falls into District 6.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that council approve the real estate purchase agreement and authorize the necessary signatures.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion was made and seconded. The clerk will open a roll. Members cast their votes. With a result of 6 yeas to 1 nay, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
2019-2020 CDBG Domestic Violence Shelter Services Contract Amendments.
Welcome again, Sally.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Sally Stang, Housing and Community Services Director for the record. The item I have for you today is an amendment to the Domestic Violence Shelter Services contracts under CDBG. We touched upon this briefly at the June 2nd meeting of the CARES Act amendments to our CDBG plan. So the City of Wichita is an entitlement city under the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and we receive federal funding for community development activities, specifically CDBG, the Home Investment Partner Program, and Emergency Solutions Grant. On June 11th, 2019, the council designated $250,000 from anticipated 2019-2020 CDBG funds for domestic violence shelter services in support of Wichita Family Crisis Center, Catholic Charities Harbor House, and Stepstone. In addition to our regular 2019-2020 annual funding allocation of just over $2.8 million, the city will receive $1,725,897 in additional CDBG funding authorized under the CARES Act. CDBG funding authorized under the CARES Act must be used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus COVID-19 public health emergency. Due to COVID-19, domestic violence shelters are experiencing increased demand for a variety of their services for victims and families, resulting in additional payroll and other operational expenses. There's also widespread need for technological improvements to support social distancing. Donations to the shelters have also dramatically decreased, and the shelters need funding for materials such as food, sanitary items, PPE, cleaning supplies. We reached out to the shelters, and they submitted a needs assessment related to the virus, and we are recommending an allocation of 30% increase to their original funding, which equates to $39,000 for Wichita Family Crisis Center, $29,100 for Catholic Charities, and $6,900 to Stepstone. These organizations are still required to expend their regular CDBG allocation by the end of this month, but they'll have until September 30th of 2020 to expend this additional allocation in response to COVID-19. And we do expect that the funding for COVID-19 will be available in their 2020 contracts as well. There is no impact to the general fund. All of this funding is coming through the CARES Act. And it is recommended that the City Council authorize the CARES Act funding allocations in the total amount of $75,000, approve the contract amendments, and authorize the necessary signatures. And stand for any questions.
There are questions for the conferee? Comments? See none. We'll go out to Century 2. Megan, is there any input on this item as well?
No comments here.
Excellent. Bring discussion back to the bench. Is there any questions or comments? If none, I will make the motion to move to accept staff's recommended action to authorize the CDBG CARES Act funding allocations in the total amount of $75,000, approve the contract amendments, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. If there's no discussion on the motion, clerk will open the roll and members will cast their vote. The result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
Lieutenant Erwin Bleckley Memorial, Wichita Dwight D. Eisenhower National Airport.
Welcome, sir.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the council.
Morning.
I'm Victor White, the Director of Airports. Let me find the button here. It's different from the last time I was here. I think it's this one. Nope. Which one is it? Oh, the keyboard. Okay, just the arrow?
Guess as good as ours.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you. Beg your indulgence there for lack of practice here. The item before you today is, I want to make sure that y'all understand, is not a staff proposal. I'm just the messenger on behalf of a group of citizens tentatively called the Bleckley Airport Memorial Committee and their board of directors. And they're requesting approval from the airport authority to install an airplane, a statue, and other related memorabilia inside the terminal at Eisenhower Airport to honor Lieutenant Erwin Bleckley, an Army aviator and a Wichita native who received the Medal of Honor for his heroic actions during World War I. I'm told that Bleckley is the only Aviation Medal of Honor recipient with Wichita ties, and an aircraft of the same type that Bleckley flew on his fatal mission when he was shot down by the Germans, I believe in 1918, is available for purchase, and the group has been offered a right of first refusal to buy it. The group would like to do a public fundraising, an effort to obtain the funds needed to acquire, restore, and install the plane and the other display materials. Excuse me. There would be they have said that there would be no cost to the airport authority for the acquisition, restoration, engineering, and installation of the plane and the other items. And the plane itself would be loaned to the authority for a long-term display. Now, it is unknown, there's a lot of unknowns about this project, but it's truly unknown if the plane would even fit inside the terminal. It's very large. I believe the wingspan is over 40 feet. And we don't know at this point if it can be physically hung from the ceiling as proposed by this group. So therefore, we would believe that if you approve this, that the group should be required to use the original terminal design team, specifically meaning the architect and structural engineering firm, to determine if hanging it is feasible. And they should also be required to use the same contractor which built the terminal to ensure that there's a safe and proper installation. Now, the group presented this request to the Airport Advisory Board at their June 1st meeting. There was extensive discussion, took place over at least the course of an hour, related to these concerns of sizing and if there is an appropriate location inside the terminal because of its large size, issues with the plane potentially interfering with other operational functions of the terminal, visual distractions with existing public art, advertising, and wayfinding signage. We would think that it's recommended that if you approve this, that the design council would be involved in the siting of the project. And of course, it must be done at no cost to the authority. Now, I shot a few photos last week of a possible area that, if you were to do this, that I think might be possible. In the baggage claim area, there is a large area. It looks way bigger than it probably will be in the future, because if you see it from this angle, the little black boxes straight ahead are storage lockers that the airlines use for lost bags and child carriers and things of that nature. That area is designated in the plans for future airline baggage service offices as the need develops. In fact, we were working with airlines late last year on that concept. So that would be built out at some point with some office space. And then to the right of those black lockers is the site of the fourth baggage carousel, like the other three. So even though it's an empty floor space today, if we were to put the plane on the floor or on a pedestal on the floor, it would be in the way of something in the future. So we need to make sure that we don't preclude future operational development of the terminal. Now, to satisfy myself in trying to find out if there were a way to do this, and I beg your mercy on my quality of Photoshop work here, I put these together quickly last week, just to see what it might look like if we were to hang the plane in that area that I just mentioned. I had some trouble finding actual photographs online of the similar plane, but I believe this is the same model, and these are not to scale, but they're really close. The columns and the beams overhead are 30 foot apart, and if you have a 40-foot wingspan, it looks feasible that you could hang the plane from one of those overhead beams, and then it would straddle about 20 feet on either side of that beam. You have a little less space involved. If you put the plane into kind of a bank, you gain a couple of feet that way. This is conceivably what it could look like if it's technically feasible to do it. This is from the mezzanine level looking that direction towards the end. And again, one of the things I mentioned was interference visually with advertising, the public art. You know, the 360-foot long glass sculpture is to the left of this picture, so if we were to put it down at that end, it really wouldn't be in the way of that, but it would block the paid advertising at the end of the building. So the Airport Advisory Board did vote unanimously after all the discussion to recommend that you all approve this request as long as there's conditions associated with it. And so therefore, our recommendation is to approve the request to privately fund the acquisition, the restoration, the installation, and display of the aircraft at the airport, if it can be determined that the aircraft will fit in an appropriate location and the installation can be accomplished without hindering other airport operations or functions. Probably didn't write this correctly because I needed to add something after I turned it in, that if you approve it, I would strongly recommend that we enter into a contract, some part of a written agreement with this group that specifies all the terms and the conditions and things that they would have to follow through with to make it happen. And so I'm available to answer some limited questions. This is not my proposal, but I know a little bit. But I do believe we have some representatives of the group at Century 2 that would like to speak. As you know, Mr. Zerker appeared before you last week at the public agenda to make his 5-minute presentation. So I believe he's down there right now.
Chair will recognize.
There.
Yes.
Perfect. I have the gentleman right here.
All right, well, let's go ahead and recognize him then.
Hello, Mr. Mayor.
Hello. Welcome.
Good morning. Yes, on this proposal, this is an opportunity that came about on May the 2nd when this aircraft, which was never intended to be here, suffered a hard landing and suffered some structural damage, and the owner of the aircraft decided the best use for it was to restore it and hopefully sell it to Wichita because it is identical to the same aircraft that Irwin Bleckley flew and died in 1918. And so this is an historic opportunity, a once in the city of Wichita's history, to acquire an aircraft of this historic value. And as far as the details of where to display at the airport, I think we can get this ironed out down the road. We have our ideas too. Victor has his. But the opportunity to acquire this aircraft will probably never happen again. And we were formed as a group back last year, actually. We were actually going to have a replica built to hopefully display at the airport, but now we can get the identical, the actual aircraft identical, the same one he died in or flew in. And it just has so much more historical value. And the other display items that go along with it, the bronze statue, the Medal of Honor, the artifacts, the photographs, documents, and things like that. But the aircraft is the centerpiece of this display, and we want to work with the Design Council, with Victor very closely, with the city, with the aviation community, everybody actually, to make the best presentation for the aircraft and for Lieutenant Buckley as possible. And with that, I'll throw it open to any other questions you may have.
Questions? I don't believe so. We have members who have lined up to speak, but I believe that they were, if you would stand by in case they have questions or if they just have comments, that would be appreciated. With that, Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you, Victor. Great job. Thank you for always being willing to do things to enhance an already fantastic state-of-the-art facility that is truly one of the gems of our community. I do just have a few quick questions, and one you briefly commented on is just to make sure that there's some sort of memorandum of understanding with deliverables is, I think, going to be really important, just to make sure everybody knows whose role is whose. And then another question that I had is, I know they're seeking funding to be able to make this happen. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
So how much, I'm probably not going to say this is varnished as I should ask it, but will the funding have to all be sought before we take next steps, or just to make sure we have a timeline? And then also, what about insurance? Because it will be their asset in our facility. So if, heaven forbid, we had some sort of accident, not only, natural disaster or something, fire in the building, what about the insurance for the asset? But then also, is there extra liability for the airport having something that large hanging as a structure? I don't know, but it seems like a question to ask. And then, just out of curiosity, what if it won't fit, or if it isn't feasible, then what happens?
That would be, those are all wonderful questions, and I agree that we should look into every one of those things. I don't know if the group has a plan B, if they buy it and then it won't fit, or it will fit, but you can't put it where they want to put it. So I don't know what their options are at this point.
And Bob, I don't know, you kind of were nodding if you have any of those answers or thoughts, or...
No, I think they're prepared to address maybe a couple of the questions you raised, but I think all of those issues should be addressed in an agreement so that we can clarify the liability issues as well as the contingency if we can't find an appropriate location.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Victor.
I would like to just make one additional comment about the hanging concept. When the building was being designed, 10 plus years ago, we had a lot of discussion with the architects and the engineering firms about the feasibility of doing it. And because we had a lot of requests back in those days from Learjet and Beechcraft and Cessna and everybody who wanted to hang a plane inside the terminal. And we all made the decision we would not pursue that. And so as a result, the architects and the structural engineers didn't include any beefing up of the structure, if you will, to be able to do that. So again, that's why it's important, I think it's imperative that we have the architectural firm and the structural engineering firm look at those overhead columns and see, can it be done? I think it can, just from strictly a weight standpoint. I think the plane is 2,000 or 3,000 pounds. That's big, but it may not be a problem. The question is really going to be, how do you attach it to that overhead beam without destroying the thing, because that is I believe it's a glass reinforced fiber gypsum board kind of a structure that wraps those overhead beams, and they'd have to drill through it and weld something, bolt something onto the I-beams that are up there behind that white stuff. And so all those were questions that none of us know. I truly do not know.
Did the person who has brought this project to us, did you want to comment on any of those questions?
Sure. We have talked with Victor somewhat at length about this. We think it's very sound to use the same structural design firm, the same architectural firm, the same construction company. We want all these we want to work with him on this. We think that the plane can be made suspendable at the airport. I think there's a way to do it. The other board member is not here right now, but his name is Grant Shoemaker, and he's got extensive experience with structures and things like that. He's a retired commercial airline pilot, captain, and he's a native of Wichita like I am. The critical need right now is we have a time window to purchase the aircraft. Right now, the insurance settlement is still being negotiated. But we'll have about a 30 to 40-day window to purchase the aircraft once we get the approval from the city, if we can get the approval from the city. And we're ready to go. We have everything in place. We have several pledges, actually, but we think this plane has such an historic value because it's identical to the same plane that our only aviation Medal of Honor recipient flew in and died in. And I would say, too, that Erwin Bleckley is an historical figure. A lot of Wichitans have never learned about him or been taught about him because he lived so long ago. But I think it's a story that should fit and should be promoted at our airport. I think the aircraft, if it's feasible to suspend it in the aircraft, should be done so. I think this is an opportunity that Wichita needs to take advantage of. I think it would be very disappointing if we did not, because we'll probably never have this opportunity come our way again. And there are two other airports that have aircraft suspended from their, well, one's suspended, the other is ground-based, and that is Eddie Butch O'Hare in Chicago's O'Hare Airport. He has a ground-based display of his Grumman plane that he flew in World War II. He's a Medal of Honor recipient. And then the other aviator is Frank Luke, and he has his SPAD 8 suspended from the ceiling at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. And Wichita is only the third city in America that we know of that has the opportunity to honor a Medal of Honor recipient aviator with his plane at his own airport. And I think this is an opportunity that is just too good to pass by.
Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mayor. Victor, you mentioned at the Airport Advisory Board there was extensive conversation about this. Unfortunately, we do not have the minutes of that meeting. I'd like a request to get a copy of those so we could see what was discussed and what other concerns may have been addressed that we're not thinking of today.
Minutes don't exist yet.
Okay.
It was
that was just
meeting.
The first, right?
It was a rookie thing for us to do, but it was also a Teams meeting, so it was recorded audio and visual wise, so I could send you all the link.
Yeah.
Watch it if you'd like to do that, or listen to it, I should say, because there's really nothing to see. Most of the, and I'll be candid with you, most of the objections, if you will, were from me. And the board members recognized those kinds of comments that I had because I was trying to guide them in a direction to be careful. Because, frankly, I think the cart's before the horse a little bit in this issue, that they're asking for you to approve something, we don't know if it's going to work yet. But maybe it will. Yeah. We just don't know that. So I think the enthusiasm, however, from the board was remarkable. In fact, one of the board members made the comment during the meeting, he'll give $1,000 right on the spot to start the fundraising campaign. So I think they want to do it if it's feasible.
Right, and I certainly understand the time necessity and the unknowns and just trying to have eyes fully open. And I know we're being asked to do a lot with this, and there's a lot of ifs and so forth here. I just want to make sure I have as much information as possible. I agree that Bleckley needs recognition and deserves the honor. I just want to make sure we're doing it the right way, in a way that protects our airport as well.
Vice Mayor Claycomb.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions, Victor. First, I do want to applaud the citizens group for what they're doing, but I also want to, as Councilmember Fry said, make sure that we protect our airport. You talked about the desire for this going to the Design Council if we would approve this. Were they involved in the original design of the airport?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The Design Council and the Arts Council separately spent extensive meetings and presentations with me and the architectural team to figure out everything, as well as the picking of the public art.
Yeah.
And so I think from a protectionist standpoint, I'm very protective of the facility, and have over the last 5 years, have steered away many things that I think would not fit, would not look good. We don't want to junk it up. And so this is a different kind of a thing that, if done properly, might be okay.
Yeah. So, Mayor, I think if sounds like we may want to, I know time is of the essence, but if we want to look at the meeting of the advisory board, we'll need a little bit more time, but I think I would like to, if we get to a motion, to make sure that we have that in the motion, that the design council is consulted, and I know this will be in the MOU, but I'd like it to come from us also, and that they work with the original architectural, structure, engineering, construction firms. And I also think this says that it shouldn't hinder other airport operations or functions, and I think we ought to say, and aesthetics or art, because, and maybe that's implied, but I'd like that, because our airport is beautiful, and I like you, want to make sure that we don't hinder any of that. And then you also, in talking about the baggage claim and that area of possible expansion, I think that we ought to consider current and future plans, because we know what that's planned for, and we don't, again, want to hinder our future plans with something. So, again, I do applaud the citizen group. I think what they've done and are bringing forward is a great idea, but we do have an amenity that we need to also take good care of. So, thank you.
Councilman Patel.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate something that Victor said when he was talking about the recommended action, just to make sure that if we do proceed with this and we get to the motion phase, that I do agree that we need to include the part that there needs to be some sort of memorandum of understanding or contract or something with some of the questions that we've laid out. So we might need some wordsmithing from legal, but just wanted to mention that again, that for me to be supportive, that would have to be included in the motion, and it's not presented here now, so.
I will apologize for that, because I was in a real rush to get this done, like in one day last week, as well as the PowerPoint. And over the weekend, after things were turned in, I thought of a number of these things. Geez, I wish I'd have put that in the recommendation.
No problem.
I've jotted up some language for when I make the motion, and would invite legal and others to help add to it so that the intent of the council is included. Is there more discussion before we get to the motion phase? Yikes, our computer just crashed over there, so I guess all right, we'll get to the motion stage, because our other computers are still working. So with that, I'll make the motion to take staff's recommended action to approve the request to privately fund the acquisition, restoration, installation, and display of the aircraft at Eisenhower National Airport if it can be determined that the aircraft will fit in an appropriate location and the installation can be accomplished without hindering other airport operations or functions. A memorandum of understanding will be agreed to in a contract with a protection of our airport and use of the original architects moving forward would be the amendment to the motion to ensure. And I got Vice Mayor Claycomb on, or I think you might want to add to that.
Yes, if you, I don't know if it's a substitute or if you would recognize a friendly amendment that hindering other current and future plans for airport operations or functions and aesthetics and public art, and in addition that this go before the design council as part of the process.
As part of the contract. Yes, of course, I would see that as a friendly amendment, and it looks like we have Councilmember Johnson who's going to jump in and add to the amendment. Go for it.
Thanks, Mayor. Just another additional friendly amendment. You mentioned architects. Victor also mentioned engineers, so would you add that to your amendment?
Noted as a friendly amendment. Let's add in engineers. Councilmember Bluebog.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a clarification on the Vice Mayor's motion. Were we saying in this case only, or everything future for the airport?
just this case.
Okay.
Just-
I
yeah,
thought I
just
was
on
making
this.
more of a blanket.
Thank you.
Okay.
The contract will, yeah, the intent of the motion is the contract to be an understanding with this particular item. Madam Clerk, would you read back the amended part of the motion?
The world's longest motion. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get all of that. I do know that you were wanting to enter into a contract with the group and to add a MOU and to involve the design council and make sure that they're consulted as far as the design and aesthetics. I will get it verbatim, though, by listening back
It's
on
the use
the-
of original architects, as well as Councilmember Johnson had
Engineers.
original architects and engineers with a focus on protecting our airport. And Councilmember or Vice Mayor Claycomb, was that?
And current and future plans, did you get that in there for current and future plans for airport operations, functions, aesthetics and art?
Right, when I listen back, all that will be added into the
we'll get it all.
motion.
Thank you.
And
design
with the
council.
understanding that the contract doesn't exceed this one project from Councilmember Bluebog. So with that, that is the amendments on the fly. Is there a second?
Can I second that with? I second it.
You can. Motion has been made and seconded. Clerk will open a roll. Members cast the votes. With a result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass as amended. Madam Clerk,
Councilmember comments and appointments.
are there any appointments to boards? Councilmember Bluebog.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make an appointment to my district advisory board. I'm Colby Unruh.
Is there other appointments to boards that we can add to one motion?
Yeah, I have an
Councilmember
appointment and a
Johnson.
comment. So I'll just give my appointment now. I want to appoint Rachel Holland to the District Advisory Board. She lives in South District 1, and I need better representation from South District 1.
Excellent. Councilmember Clendenin.
I don't have any appointments today, just comments, so I can let the appointments, if
through
there's
first.
more appointments.
We'll call on you afterwards. Any other appointments to boards? Seeing none, there's a motion to make appointments to boards by Councilmember Bluebog and Councilmember Johnson. I will second that motion. If there is no discussion on said motion, clerk will open the roll. Members will cast their votes. With a result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. We are now moved into comments. So with that, the chair recognizes Councilmember Clendenin.
Or Johnson.
Johnson's next.
Mayor, I just wanted to make a couple comments about now our late mayor, Carl Brewer. He was just elected to his second term the year that I was elected to this body. And it actually hit me a little bit harder than I thought something like that would. He was extremely influential to me and the way I serve and the way that I conduct myself on this council. When I was first elected, got swore in, walked into his office and held out his hand and said, "Welcome to the family," knowing that now all of a sudden a lot of people weren't going to like decisions that I made. Being very green in politics, he knew that it could be very alienating, which I think all of us on this bench understand. Many times when I struggled with votes that were difficult, he took me into his office. He looked at me and said, "Listen, you need to understand that at least half the people in the city are not going to like you after every council meeting, so just get used to it." I think he was overstating it, and I think he knew it, but he was always very encouraging to me. He was a great leader. He was really a great man. I saw many things that were not true said about him just in the line of politics that he brushed off because he knew the truth about himself. He knew exactly who he was. He served with honor in the military. He served with honor in our community. And he will be sorely missed by me. He and I definitely had our bumps in the road, But I respect the heck out of that man, and I will continue to respect him, and look forward to seeing him again someday. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment about the Patrol East substation. I've received a lot of calls and emails about that from the community with some concerns, and most of the concern being about the expanded footprint from the original presentation they received. So I just wanted to publicly say, because I've said this to our city manager, but I'd like to put this project on hold, not have it come to the council on July 7th, and work with staff to re-engage the neighborhood on this project so that we can get more neighborhood engagement input on it.
Councilmember Bubach.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Just like to echo the same comments as Councilmember Clendenin. Whenever I first came onto the Wichita City Council, Mayor Brewer and I weren't particularly politically aligned, but the first thing he really rolled out the welcome mat, made sure that, set you down, and he viewed the city council as well as the city when he is the mayor, as it was a family. He would tell you the council's a family, we're gonna fight like a family, but we're gonna work together and solve things like a family. And that's the way he viewed all of his leadership roles. I don't think a lot of people realize the numerous organizations he was involved with. I mean, he just loved to give back to the community. He was just on the go all the time. I remember, two of my youngest children were born right after I got on the council, and one of them was born after I was on the council. And my phone would ring at 11 o'clock at night, and my wife would look at me and say, "Well, good night, honey," because she knew Carl was calling, and he'd be on the phone for a couple hours. And that's just, the way, that's the type of guy he was. He didn't know a stranger. I went to China with Mayor Brewer. I went to Mexico with the mayor, and you talk about a scene. Mayor Brewer did stick out in China. I mean, he was a head taller than everybody there, but he was like a rock star. He didn't know a stranger. Everybody, he just had a charisma to him and a magnet that just pulled everybody in. So, prayers out to the family of Mayor Brewer, but the whole city lost a great man there, and he will be deeply missed.
I'm just going to follow up with a brief story about the mayor. I believe that his legacy in the council has just been adequately expressed as, creating that environment of family. I remember working with him a little bit on his gubernatorial race and getting a call, and I just wanted to kind of shed light on how he was perceived in a more partisan light, where he was actually in the Democratic primary running for governor. And I remember this call, he seemed frustrated because he went to a debate, and if anybody remembers the gubernatorial primary, there were a lot of candidates, and everyone was so nice and respectful to him. And he made a comment where he said, I just must be grandpa. Everyone just must see me as grandpa. And, and it's like, no, Carl, it's because, you have that aura about you. When you speak, you have a presence. And that presence, I think, even not, as we heard from City Council, was something that brought people together, even in what I think we consider really kind of high-heated, partisan world. He still maintained that to an extent where it was infectious. It actually infected his rivals in the Democratic primary at that time to not be bitter, to not take political cheap shots. His aura was contagious. It's something we can learn from when it comes to chivalry and focusing, I think, on bringing people together first, and then extending that into creating policy. So with that, I just enjoy these stories because I was in the legislature when he was here. I didn't have a chance to serve with him, but I think that these stories keep him alive at these meetings and in our hearts. So with that, is there further comments or appointments to boards or anything else? See none, with that, I will go ahead and make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. If there's no discussion on said motion, clerk will open a roll, members cast their vote. Go to open a roll. Almost. And there we go. For the result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. We are adjourned. Thank you.